Good morning, or good afternoon. It seems at the commencements that most of us are traditionally used to celebrating that we know in our hearts that we're celebrating the end of a postdoc, the end of a college graduation time. And so I'm going to start today at the commencement of the next big idea with the traditional story of the end. And so for me, in starting this company, it is the only appropriate place to start. And then we'll continue from there. If you could cue the video from here.
This is the end. The end of the assembly line. The end of the showroom floor. The end of the smooth-talking salesman. The hard sell. The soft sell. The oversized inflatable gorillas. And overinflated inventory that absolutely must go. This is the end of the junkyard full of old cars, leaching chemicals into the ground. Born from the concept of cradle-to-cradle manufacturing. Printed in front of you to be the exact car you want. Melted, deconstructed, and rebuilt to be the next car you need. This is where vehicle manufacturing as we know it comes to an end. And where vehicle manufacturing as it should be begins.
It's a pleasure to join you this afternoon, and Deborah, thank you for convening us. We heard about Vannevar Bush last night. I'd like to take you back to 50 years before that, where up in the sky someplace, Frederick Taylor and Henry Ford and Gottlieb Daimler are looking down on us and saying, we gave you 120 years of mass manufacturing. Take that. And so what we're doing is we're evolving that legacy at the end of their paradigm. And I couldn't follow two better speakers today, Keoki and Tom, standing up and talking about human-machine cooperation and material competitiveness. That's what allows us to define the commencement of this new manufacturing era. And for me, tackling the vehicle system was worthwhile because it is the biggest system of them all. In 2004, I was a Marine in Iraq, patrolling the lower 250 miles south of Baghdad, and two of my friends were killed that year, and I decided to start Local Motors. That was my motivation. Many entrepreneurs and business people and organizational leaders have motivations that seem a lot like it. But what I was insistent upon doing was making sure that technology showed up quickly in the vehicles that I was going to use and that my children were going to use. That's what Local Motors is about. So the biggest system of them all. Henry Ford and Frederick Taylor gave you the mass assembly line that's on the left. And today it's turned into something that looks more advanced, but it really isn't much different. It's not a next big idea. That's nothing to say that the work that has gone into it hasn't been anything other than superhuman. It is. Alfred Sloan created an entire management school to try to manage this complexity. But it hasn't given us enough to save my friends who were killed in combat working in vehicles that could have been different. So for me, upending a $2 trillion industry and helping people not die and using our resources more efficiently is a big idea. And so moving forward, affecting resources, John Rockefeller, inflation adjusted, perhaps the wealthiest person in history, couldn't have gotten that wealthy if the handmaiden of the vehicle industry hadn't come along and made him a rich man. But changing the resource intensity and the desire to say, that's how it's always been done, is something that needs a big idea to fix. This was a picture I took outside of Mumbai. That's a wealthy family driving on a motorcycle from a very advanced manufacturer that makes motorcycles at 2 seconds a cycle time. And that's 5 people riding on a motorcycle. Doing well in society doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing good in transportation. We need to change this. And so coming from the military, I felt an obligation to be great if I was going to join society in business and leave society in being there to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. We stand here, and it's a U.S. national forum on the subject of competitiveness. I grew up in a rare state. I went around the world for 7 years on a boat. I wasn't on U.S. soil. But I did see a ton of different communities. And I would throw my passport out into the crowd as a devoted Marine to say that we are in a world economy right now. Tom, my predecessor, who stood up here and talked, speaks a lot about his national lab giving back to society and the world, not just giving back to the United States. And so the obligation to be great runs large in what we do. And in my opinion, looking and standing on the shoulders of giants, getting rid of the complexity is what is important in order to be able to fix everything that we do. And so going back to the drawing board is what I started with in 2004. We brought forward something called co-creation. Co-creation is about bringing together more minds to solve the tough problems of today. But you couldn't do it in Henry Ford's time because we weren't digitally enabled. The most important and impressive person I've ever met in life was sitting backstage with Tim Berners-Lee talking about the creation of the World Wide Web. Truly, collaborating with people allows you to be able to move things forward faster. These are the collaborators in Local Motors' ecosystem that have helped us go everywhere from the Guinness Book of World Record first co-created car to now the latest Guinness Book of World Record for the world's first 3D printed car. Local Motors couldn't have done it by hiring those people. We had to build an engine to let them do co-creation, not crowdsourcing, together. And that engine included micromanufacturing. It wasn't enough to take Silicon Valley's legacy and say, we're just going to go out and we are going to give you software that will solve all of your problems. We had to bite off on the tough things, which means taking the ideas and bringing them in a software-like world to a minimum viable product. So Lego is a good example, and it's one of the reasons why we show that. Today, you see our microfactories as spinning balls of energy to be able to do in the vehicle manufacturing world the seemingly impossible, which is to bring for low capital and quick time vehicles like that 3D printed car that we drove onto stage as a prototype 2 years ago here, and now we're putting into production. Come visit that microfactory. I guarantee if you bring your children, they'll tell you all about it. This is the digital thread that we begin with, and Kiyoki talked about this a lot. The digital thread can start as something that is digital and goes into a shop drawing and then goes to a supplier, and later on they deliver you something back, but that's antiquated. We want them to be able to take the digital drawing and assemble everything in real time, as he showed you with the assembly of that satellite. The promise of a microfactory is we can do it faster and less time, because we bring less capital, because we bring more minds to work. And what I'd ask you to think about in competitiveness is actually being a little more collaborative in order to be able to achieve speed. We've seen it in software. Today, Linux is the kernel that runs 90% of our supercomputers that Tom talked about. That was built on an open kernel. For those of you that have an iPhone or an Android device, open software made those possible. Open hardware is the next idea that we're moving on. So if you look at that, what that means is it means you're taking more minds to solve problems. We started in the motorcycle industry and we 3D printed an intake. That was before Tom and the work that we've done with the Oak Ridge National Lab allowed us to go big. So that intake was designed, the whole motorcycle was designed by our community. But moving forward from there, to be able to take a small intake and then go to a whole car, structurally, and then 2 years after that to have the knowledge of characterizing the materials in order to be able to make that digital thread come alive, truly is the promise of a next big idea. These materials and these people who join the community to make things come alive are the soul of what it means to be competitive. This history of a 7-year timeline is something that we've needed to get beyond. This is the automotive supply chain down to customer history. And so taking out logistics and dealers like Tesla has done is an important step along the way. And for those of you who are dealers, I apologize. I do think there is a future for you in the industry, but the structure of the industry is changing radically right now. We are shortening the development and launch time to 6 months. in a vehicle out of a little microfactory like this, and then we distribute those all over the world. Today we're in Phoenix, we're in Knoxville, we're in Berlin, we have a demonstration facility here in Washington, D.C., and soon you'll see us show up in 20 other locations, building vehicles for people to use, just for their bespoke use. And they are sustainable, they are recyclable. This is a project that we started, and it took us 2.5 months to bring a vehicle out that was an EV that portended the development of what I'm about to show you. Being able to do that work lets us work in this blue sky space to the left. We have taken this parabolic curve of tons of money up on the far left, amortized by millions of units to bring it down on the far right, and we've flattened that curve. We've said digital manufacturing can allow you to operate in the low volume and make money. It's that simple. So what we've done with that is we've said now you can imagine building those vehicles that I was dreaming about back in Iraq in 2004 and putting them profitably on the market at unit runs of 200 in a city, for that city, immediately, now. And so the first vehicle that we brought out, we showed as a prototype. Today, I'm happy to announce that for the next 2.5 years, we have orders for Ollie, which is a 3D printed autonomous shuttle that will be running here in DC this spring, and you're going to be able to drive it. You'll be able to ride it. And we will put 120 of those out in 2017, from Copenhagen to San Francisco. And the next year, we're going to put several hundred more on the streets. And the year after that, we will put several thousand more on the streets. And that will still be 1.5 years before Ford Motor Company brings out its level 4 autonomous vehicle for the public. That is speed. But it's not scale. Ford will still have a place in this ecosystem. And that's the promise of competitiveness. And if we can do it for that, you should go online and see what we've done with Airbus in order to be able to launch this drone in record time. This is the future of manufacturing new vehicle systems in the ground and in the air. And I'm proud to share it with you today, so thank you for convening us. Thank you.